Hi, everyone. Today we'll be talking about understanding the MBA rankings. What are the differences between the MBA rankings? Why are there differences between the MBA rankings? Are MBA rankings important? Everything you wanted to know about MBA rankings? Let's begin. My name is Shimri Winters. I'm an MBA admissions consultant from ARINGO MBA Admissions Consulting. I'm a London Business School grad as well. This is my only slide about ARINGO that doesn't speak about MBA rankings. Who are we? We're a very good boutique MBA admissions consulting firm. We work with candidates on top MBA programs. We have great statistics. Check us out online, aringo.com. We help with everything: school selection, chances assessment, project management, when to apply, who to apply to, and of course with the application itself, essay, CV, help with your letters of recommendation, interview prep, scholarship prep, school selection, everything. Uh, Check us out. That was my only slide about ARINGO. Now let's talk about MBA rankings. Actually, let's not talk about MBA rankings. And let's think for a second, are MBA rankings so important? And I took here two very random schools. I took NYU Stern, ranked 6 on the US News MBA ranking. That's very good. And I took Carnegie Mellon, Pepper Business School, and it's ranked 18 on the US News MBA ranking. Quite good. And I kind of checked the difference between the salaries, the difference between the bonus. You kind of get the same number. There was a $10,000 difference. Um, and maybe that's a lot annually, although living in Manhattan probably costs more than $10,000 annually more than living anywhere else. So, as you can see, the Carnegie Mellon employment reports are super impressive. 98% stay in the US, 96% of the candidates received a job offer, very impressive. And here on the right, I put one of these schools' statistics from their employment report. And as you can see, a third go to consulting and around 30% go to tech and maybe 12% go to finance. And, if you look according to the function, very similar functions to other business schools, consulting, finance, general management. Now, which school is this? So, if you check Harvard Business School, if you check Kellogg, Northwestern, if you check Chicago Booth, Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, Columbia, you would probably see very similar numbers. Okay, you would probably see a third going to consulting, a third going to tech, 10 to 20% going to finance, depends which school, depends exactly which. These were actually the Carnegie Mellon statistics. And I hope this kind of makes you think, do I, have to go to a top 3 school? Maybe a school that's ranked 18 actually will give me the same result. I just put here another slide that shows the average salary, including the bonus. You can see here the NYU Stern, right? I think it was 170 plus 35. So you get to the $203.1 thousand a starting salary for MBA candidates. But if you can see, Dartmouth, you were getting the same kind of salary, even $1,000 more. And, MIT were paying even more. Northwestern, Cornell were paying something very similar. And I could have continued the top 15 list. You would have seen a very straight line here in the graph. Very similar salaries, very similar job opportunities for top 15 schools. So we're going to talk about the rankings and we're going to talk about why school is ranked 3 and not 4. But again, it's okay to also consider, and you should be considering also, schools which are not just ranked the top 3 or 4 in a certain ranking. Okay, now let's talk about the rankings, and here's the agenda for this session. It's not going to be that long. There's going to be a few tables and graphs and things, and you can pause this YouTube video and kind of look through the certain things because I'm not going to talk about every single parameter. First thing is we're going to kind of explain why there's a difference between MBA rankings. I'm going to talk about the 5 leading rankings. Going to speak about each one, how it calculates its results, kind of show the main criteria, and then again, kind of explain a bit more why schools are different, have different rankings across the different ranking sites, and maybe give you my 2 cents to all of this. So I hope that makes sense. I'm talking very quickly. I'll slow down because we're going to talk now about why is the ranking different. And I gave here two examples. Chicago Booth, it's a fantastic school. It's ranked number 4 this year on the US News MBA ranking. I think it was ranked number 2 last year. Um, Fantastic school, but it's only ranked 20 on the Financial Times MBA ranking. Why is this? Same with INSEAD, was ranked number 1 in 4 out of the last 5 or 6 years on globally on the Financial Times MBA rankings, but it's not even ranked on the US News MBA ranking. Why is this? Well, each ranking is just looking at something a bit different and is choosing different data sources to look at this something which is a bit different. I'm going to go into each school separately, but this is kind of just a high level slide. And the Financial Times mainly looks at money, return on investment. How many MBAs found a job? How much money were they making? Okay. And all the return on investment parameters for the Financial Times is like 60%. So schools where the alumni find a job very quickly and make a lot of money are going to be ranked very high on the Financial Times. QS, they give a lot of weight to the global reputation. So that's something a bit different than just ROI. US News, well, I'm already going to answer why INSEAD isn't there because they only rank US programs. And they kind of give a lot to the brand of the school, the selectiveness of the school, the prestigiousness of the school. And we'll discuss that a bit more. The other two are there as well. You can see Bloomberg is student experience, and The Economist is actually a ranking that stopped in 2022. So let's go into that. But they also were doing a lot of student surveys and checking where the students felt that they're growing, getting the most out of their MBA. Okay, let's kind of, this is my first graph or very heavy slide. I'm not going to go into everything because I'm actually going to go into every one of these rankings, but you can pause it for a second and try and read the difference between the various rankings and their methodologies. But let's go into every single ranking and I'll explain a bit more. So the Financial Times ranking, I actually consider this one of the most important rankings, probably the one I would send candidates who are looking for international MBAs to kind of get their first feel of what are the top 10 or 15 or 20 schools. Again, I'm not sure I put such a big emphasis on a school that's ranked 4 and a school that's ranked 8. And there were a lot of surprises on this ranking along the last few years. Some schools which I personally don't consider in the top 5 of Europe were suddenly ranked in the top 3 globally. But if you look at this ranking for the last year or 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, and you kind of make a little 5-year graph, I think it does give a very good picture for international school. It mainly looks at return on investment, like we said, and a lot about global diversity. The way that they get their data sources is they do surveys to alumni, which I think is very important. They ask them, how long did it take you to find a job and how much money did you make or are you making? So they're getting the information from the actual people. They do look at the school data. So every school has their own data, and you can kind of Google employment report, London Business School, employment report, Harvard Business School, and you'll find the data that the school advertises. And they also check the faculty research because they do give a few points for that. I put here like the main metrics. And again, we said salary, career progression is nearly 60% of this ranking. So super important for them to see where do you make a good salary? How quickly did you find a job? Where did you work? They also give a very big weight to international diversity. So it makes sense that European schools that have a 90% diversity rate in their, in the students will get a higher score than US schools that have a 40% diversity rate in their class. So, of course, that's a good reason as well. They're looking at other factors. And they have other factors that some of the other rankings don't even consider. For example, gender balance, ESG, publications. Okay, like that's something that some of the other rankings don't even look at. I'm not sure if it's a hidden bias or not. When I was looking at this isn't a metrics, it's just something that I noticed. That usually the top schools in the rankings are very strong at sending students and graduates to consulting firms and finance roles. Now, again, this comes maybe hand to hand with NCAD or London Business School, these international schools. So I'm not sure, maybe there's a bit of a vicious cycle here, but definitely these schools also have a very high percent of consultants and finance roles post MBAs. So that's a bit about the Financial Times. QS MBA's ranking. So QS also have a university ranking, which is a bit different. That is more about the reputation of the schools and a lot about the academia. Here still, I'm reminding us about that because also the QS Global MBA ranking takes the reputation of the school as a very strong factor. They actually don't go to alumni, but they go to the employers and survey them. And they check out a lot of school information, like I said, even to a higher extent than the other rankings from an academia perspective. They do give the employer reputation. That means when they went to survey the employers and asked them which is the best MBA business school, so they give that quite a lot of weight. They do check the outcomes. The outcomes again is the numbers. How much did the graduates make, and what was the percent of the graduates that got into a full-time employment within 3 months. But they also have their own few things. With thought leadership, which like we said is how many professors have had how many articles and papers. So they're checking the academia a bit more. Again, I think they're just mainly I would take this ranking to kind of look at the how prestigious a school is or how well known it is, especially if you're looking at maybe schools which are not in the top 10. Just to make sure it's on this ranking and it's a well-known school. Of course, I would also look at everything else and the parameters. It's a very interesting data source. Again, like I said, maybe for not top 10 schools. The next ranking is, again, one ranking that I really like and choose to show candidates. So I use the Financial Times mainly for international MBA programs, and I use the US News MBA ranking to kind of look at US programs. It only ranks US programs, and it kind of gives a strong emphasis on the and prestige and on the branding and reputation of the school. And you can see they do various data sources, but again, they don't go to the students, they don't go to the alumni, they kind of use their own surveys and use the data of the school itself. And the main metrics is actually the reputation of the school, like the brand of the school. And this is kind of, they go to the recruiters and say, who do you think is the best school? They do look at stats like employment rates. So within 3 months, how many graduates found a job, etc. And they do look a bit about school selectivity, which is interesting. So let's say the higher the GMAT is or the lower the acceptance rate is, will actually raise your grade in this ranking. And I think it's a bit of a vicious cycle because the most prestigious school, the most prestigious school can ask for the highest GMAT score, and it will then rank very high. And then a lot of good candidates will think it's the best school and will keep sending it higher GMAT scores or better applications. And then maybe the acceptance rate will go lower so you understand there's a bit of a vicious cycle, especially with this ranking. And what I usually see, or I mean, what everybody sees are the same names. You're going to just see the same names that we all know, the top names, and ask my mother that knows nothing about MBA programs, what are the top 10 schools in the US? And she will probably hit 7 or 8 out of the 10 top MBA programs in this ranking because it's the famous schools, which are big and famous at everything and have amazing MBA programs. So I think there's a bit of a cycle here, although there are changes. And NYU Stern, Yale, SOM, they've risen in the rankings, and they're both jointly ranked 6th these year, in the last 2 years. So, there are changes. So check out the US News rankings again if you want to kind of place a school and see kind of where it is. Again, less emphasis if it's number 4 or number 6. But is it top 10, top 50, top 100? Interesting. The next 2 rankings, I would just use their data. I wouldn't kind of put my whole heart into them, but they're interesting. And Bloomberg is very interesting because they do a lot of surveys, and I think that's super interesting. They go to the students, they check out their uh, how they're enjoying the MBA, and then they go to the graduates and they check out, the what they're saying about how fast they found a job, how much money they're making. They also go to the employers, they also use the school data, so all very interesting. As you can see, the compensation, yes, like the ROI, which was 60% in the Financial Times, is around 35%, so it's not the only thing that they're looking at. But definitely the learning experience gets high points here. They have a bit of the diversity and entrepreneurship, which is interesting, and also a nice, interesting factor that I haven't seen in other rankings get a big weight on it. Hidden bias, they rely on the surveys. That's a good thing. That's a bad thing. We all understand people can write whatever they want, but on the other hand, they use a lot of surveys. So interesting. The last ranking is less important, mainly because it was discontinued from 2022, I think. So, interesting. They used a lot of surveys. To be honest, the main problem was that I'm not a statistics guy, but I think the numbers that they managed to survey weren't very high. And then, it can get a bit biased. So I'm less going to go into this, but again, sample sizes were a bit small and they just discontinued this ranking. Maybe it will continue again. So if I needed to sum up, this is one of the slides that you can pause for a second. I will not talk for a second, and you can kind of look. But we said, there's different factors that the rankings are looking at. And even if it's very similar factors, they're putting different weight on these factors. And even if it was very similar factors, and let's say they were putting the same weight on the factors, which they're not, they're looking at different data sources. So of course, the results are going to be very, very different, even without my hidden bias notes, okay? So even without that fact that I think the Financial Times are looking a bit more on schools that send to consulting, forget all that, okay? But they're looking at a different data source and giving different weight to the financials, the return on investment, than the US News or the Bloomberg Businessweek. So different factors, different weight on those factors, different data sources will give different results. I hope you agree. So we could have stopped here, but again, I've given some example here. NCAD, Financial Times, very, very high, but Bloomberg, not that high. Why? Again, we can check out the factors we saw before, and you'll kind of get the same result. Again, if you plug in the numbers, you'll also get these results. Some schools are very high on all rankings, and the top US schools are very high on all rankings. But again, Harvard can change, can be number 4, number 5, number 7, number 11. Depends which MBA ranking we're looking at, but I think you'll all agree Harvard Business School is a great school. IMD in Switzerland is a great school. Does it matter that QS only ranked it middle, okay, like not top? There's a reason behind that. It's just a business school and it doesn't have a huge biology and chemistry and physics department. So maybe the university as a brand got kind of a lower score than Oxford. So that can be a good reason. So there's different factors, and that's why there's different rankings, and you see complete different results on these rankings. Okay, I could have stopped there, but I did want to give you my 2 cents of it. So I get a lot of calls, and a lot of times the question is, either which MBA is the right MBA for me, or I looked at the ranking, and if it's not top 5, I'm not going, right? So I think it's kind of the same question, which is, Shimri, help me choose a school. And I think I found a framework. Now, the thing is, the framework is the simplest framework I could think about. It gives you 5 factors to decide which school to apply to. But I'm warning you, each of you should give a different weight to each of these factors. Because for one person, one factor is very, very important. For example, no scholarship, I'm not going. But another person will say, if it's not on the East Coast, I'm not going. So there might be the same fact, of course, that person would love a scholarship and the person from the scholarship would love the East Coast, but they're giving a different weight to the different factors. So I think you can copy these 5 factors into Excel, but you need to decide what weight are you giving to each of these factors between, whatever your Excel is, 0 to 100. I think a very important thing is the MBA is a means to get to your career goal. And if you want a very, very specific employer, Tesla, then to go and study in Luxembourg doesn't make much sense, okay? Because I think Tesla have very, very big offices in California. So I think you should check that out. I think if you want to work for a global consulting firm, it might be less important in which city you and in which country you study, because most big global consulting firms have offices in most big global cities, countries. So this is something you need to think about. The second thing, and sometimes I actually say to people, this is the first thing, is the geography. So Columbia Business School is an amazing MBA program. London Business School is an amazing MBA program. They probably teach very, very, very similar things. And your career output, so the employer you'll find post MBA, will be very, very similar. But where do you want to live during your MBA? 2 years in New York or 1.5 years in London? Where do you want to live post MBA? Because if you look at the Columbia employment report, 90 something percent work in the US post MBA. And if you look at the London Business School employment report, a very few, few numbers work in the US post MBA. A lot work in London, a lot work in other geographies, but not many. I can't remember if it's 10% or 15% work in the US post MBA. So this is something super important. Chicago Booth is an amazing school. But I told one of my candidates, and his wife was shouting from the other side of, I don't know, she heard this somehow, and she was shouting, "On my dead body, I'm going to live in Chicago. You know how cold it is there in the winter." So the geography was very, very important. Actually, that's a 6th factor I should add. Happy wife, happy life. If you're coming with a partner, make sure the partner is happy in this geography as well. Okay, network strength. So some schools have a stronger alumni network in some countries. So again, if you're in the US and you're thinking about staying in the US, most big schools have a very big alumni network in probably every city in the US. But if you're from Taiwan, Taipei has a less strong network for smaller schools. And it was strange. I was actually speaking to someone from another country. I won't mention it. And I was mentioning 2 schools which are ranked very similarly. And I didn't know this about this country, but one had a very strong alumni club in that country and one had no presence. So again, if you come from a specific country and you think about going back there, maybe you should kind of think about the alumni clubs and also the alumni engagement. So if you contact a few people from the school, were they very nice? Were they not very nice? If you talk to students, what are they telling you about their experience? This kind of comes to culture fit. Some schools are very collaborative. Some schools are less collaborative. I think most top 15 MBA programs teach in a case study method, but I'm sure there's some schools, maybe lower ranked, that don't teach in this method. What works for you? A big school, 1,000 people in the cohort, or 100 people? So, big city, small city, is that, I'm not sure if that's school culture or geography. So these are factors that you should take into account, but only you can put a weight and decide how important each of these factors are. The 5th one is, in my eyes, less important. The average age for an MBA candidate is 28. So you're probably 28. And you're going to probably graduate when you're 30-ish. And sorry to tell you this, a bit disappointing, but you're probably going to have another 35 plus years of working. So if this MBA was very expensive and cost $100,000, $200,000, that's so much money, and especially for students that need student loans, etc. But actually, in the grand total 30 years of work, post-MBA work that you're going to have, it might not be the most important factor in my eyes, but still, I've had candidates every year, including this year, uh, give up higher ranked MBA programs because lower ranked MBA programs gave them very high scholarships or just the tuition worked out less. Um, I just had a candidate with a GMAT waiver who got into one of the best public universities in the US, Indiana Kelley, with a $90,000 scholarship. The tuition there is actually less than the private universities. I actually can't remember the exact number. And this kind of comes out to 85% of his total cost. So, he had other options, but this was amazing for him. And he just said, of course I'm going to go on this. I'm going to have similar opportunities at the end, and it's not going to cost me as much. Okay, we're nearly there. Last slide. I just kind of put another thing which is so obvious, but I have some candidates to say, okay, if it's not Harvard, I'm not going. Okay, I gave them my whole spiel that also a school that's ranked 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 8 might be good. But then I had to also look at their profile. It's so nice that you really, 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 really want Harvard or Stanford, but that's where 90% of candidates really, really, really want. And they have a one digit, 6 or 8, depends which school, acceptance rate percent. So, it's nice that you want Harvard, but if you have a, 200 GMAT, the 0 TOEFL and no work experience, you're not going to get in. So let's also be realistic about getting into the top school that your profile can get into. And again, there's a lot of trade-off here. Maybe you should wait 3 years and improve your profile, or maybe you should go this year into a lower ranked school. So this is something we can discuss in private. Okay. Key takeaways. I kind of tried to do a summary here. Very difficult, but I tried. But I think we discussed most of these things. Different rankings. Again, what I would do is kind of always look at different rankings together, and then you can get kind of the big picture. I think that's a good idea. I put here also the schools look at the different sources. That's sorry, the rankings. That's why they get different results. And I gave you my 5-factor framework. They might be more decision factors. Definitely length of degree, or do you have a free accommodation with your aunt? Okay, so each person might have different, or you've always dreamed to live in Paris. So and you're giving that a bit of weight or a lot of weight. So each person might have their own factors that they want to kind of add to the factors of how to choose a school. Just remember, again, the MBA is the means to get you where you want to get to. So think about that first, and then think which MBA program gets you there. Wow. Okay, so that was long. This is my last slide. This is just what I've seen. Really, we've helped hundreds of candidates get into top MBA programs, thousands of candidates, but hundreds a year. And what I usually see is, again, I speak to alumni. I can see the rankings aren't the most important thing. So after talking half an hour about rankings, I'm actually going to say, chill. Definitely apply to your dream school, but it's okay to also go to a school which is ranked similar, or a couple of numbers below that ranking. You'll probably get the same result. Focus on your goals, on your career, on your growth. That will help you choose the best school for you. I gave you here the 5 factors, but you can choose whatever factors are important for you. Remember, the MBA is a platform. It's what you make out of it. Okay, some MBA candidates don't use career services. They know where they want to go to. They just send their CV to employers. They do their own thing. And some students come a bit lost, use the career services, use psychologists, use job placement fairs, use the school, use the class as a platform, become chairman of a club. It's a platform to what you want to do. So that's very important. Other stories are nice, but let's think what you want to do. So that was it. Thank you so much for watching this video about MBA rankings. I hope it added a bit of value, and I hope you learned something new. Check us out on ARINGO.com. You have my email here if you want to schedule and a barcode if you want to schedule a free profile evaluation for your profile. And see you in the next videos. Bye for now.